Yeah, g'day. I'm Ian Westmoreland. I'm the founder of Mentoring Men and the founder and CEO of Kintsugi Heroes. And I've just been on the online prosperity show with Prosper, which was an amazing experience. The most enthusiastic conversation host I've had the privilege of sharing my story with. And I think it's an interesting story around the foundation of Mentoring Men, Kintsugi Heroes, my own life journey that got me to the point where these organisations became part of my life. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another exciting episode of the Online Prosperity Show. I'm your host, Prosper Taruvinga, and today we have a truly inspiring guest with us. Now, Ian, how are you doing today, my man?
I'm doing fantastic, thanks, Prosper. And can I say that's the most enthusiastic welcome I've ever had to a podcast.
Absolutely.
I feel welcome here.
Great stuff. Well, Ian, we haven't even started yet, so we could just end the show here because I think we've already gotten all that we need, really, especially on my part. But for those that are meeting Ian for the very first time, I want you to be humbled. Now, Ian is a man who's actually left a successful 42-year career in IT to dedicate his life to helping others. I've heard of people that go out of their way to help others, but they only do it up until they break a nail or things of that nature. But Ian is not one of those people. So as the founder of Kintsugi Heroes and Mentoring Men, Ian's work has actually touched the lives of many, showing us all the beauty in imperfection and the strength that we can find in overcoming adversity. And just for a bit of fun, I want you to stick around so you can hear about his Cornish pastie story that I think is going to be leaving us in stitches. He's already started laughing behind the scenes there, so I can't wait to hear that story, and I think it's a real treat. So let's dive into the remarkable journey of Ian and uncover some invaluable lessons for us all. Now, Ian, welcome to the show. I know, we've been talking behind the scenes, but that wasn't recorded, for all to hear. Could you maybe start by telling us a bit about what actually inspired you to get started on your journey to helping others?
But just to set the scene, as you said, I worked for 42 years in paid career. Despite not being qualified, I managed to work my way into fairly senior roles as an IT manager. And then in 2013, I started to increasingly think there's more to life than just making money and delivering software changes. And on the 10th of September 2013, I got on the train to come to work, and I continued reading a book that my youngest daughter had given me. And what I read that morning transformed the thinking for the rest of my life. So in May 2014, I turned my back on my high-paid IT management role, and I've been a full-time volunteer for the last 10 plus years. And it's been a really interesting and fulfilling journey. But I feel like I'm living out the purpose for my life for the last stage. That sounds very terminal, doesn't it? For the current stage of my life now. Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Ian, for that intro into your life. So this book that you were reading, what's the name of this book?
Well, I get asked that a lot, and I just want to just say something up front. So everything I do is secular. I don't care what the background or beliefs or cultures or whatever of any of the people who engage in the not-for-profits we set up. In my own case, I'm a Christian. And what I read that day was a book by an American pastor called, I've got it here, Sun Stand Still. Steve Furtick was the pastor. And basically, he questioned, I guess, the role of what's a good Christian should be doing. And to sort of be meditating on thinking there's more to life than making money, delivering software changes. And I started reading this, so it's halfway through the book, And I started ticking these things off. And he said, we feel like we're doing our part as long as we live decent lives. And there was a sort of tick there. I was a bit of a rascal in my teens and got into a bit of trouble. Stay out of trouble, pay taxes, have babies. We had 4 babies, make a living, which I was doing, buy a boat. I even had a boat. And then he said, hit age 59 and a half, collect retirement, die. Now, I ticked off all these things and hit age 59 and a half. It's on the 10th of September 2013. I was born on the 10th of March 1954. I was 59 and a half to the day that I read that. And that was the start of a string of different events that led me down this path to leave paid work, become a volunteer mentor in primary schools and high schools, to start mentoring men, and then subsequently to start Kintsugi Heroes. So that was a key turning point in my life, away from, I guess, materialism and the things I used to think were important, to the things that I now see are far more important, far more valuable, and far more fulfilling.
Absolutely. And Ian, thank you so much for elaborating on that. Sun Stands Still should be, I think, on a lot of library shelves, because if it's got that profound message inside of it, so many people just go through life without actually knowing what their actual end goal should be or their actual contribution should be. And I'm happy that you discovered yours on that fateful day on the train.
Well, actually, I give talks around different community events. And one of the things I talk about is finding our best life. And there's a longer story, but one of the quotes, I love this quote, I put at the bottom of the presentation on this, is from Mark Twain. And it says, the 2 most important days in your life are the day you're born and then the day you find out why. And for me, I found out why on the 10th of September 2013, but I feel I call finding your best life. And I feel for so many of us, we lose track of what our best life is. We're influenced by so many other things that happen to us. We have relationships break down, we get sick. We get influenced by, I guess, a drive from around materialism, around the better house, the better car, whatever, but away from fulfillment. And I feel that this best life is where we get genuine contentment, fulfillment, and it's where we use our skills and our talents to experiences to positively impact the world around us. And I say to people, look, I did this slide for myself, but just for 10 seconds, maybe take a step back and think about what your best life would look like. You're heading down that way. And so it's been an incredible journey. The last 10 years, it's just been amazing.
Absolutely. And congratulations for having discovered that. You know, I think it was Les Brown that mentioned that the richest place in the world is a graveyard. So many people go there with their talents, music that hasn't been sung, movies that haven't been written, books that haven't been written, just because of fear. And so many people don't get to express. And there you are saying you're on the path to starting to live your best life. So it is.
Yeah, I saw a quote recently. They were so poor, all they had was money.
Ooh, that hits hard, because that's the one thing that a lot of people are vying to get, and at the expense of their life, their livelihood, and the actual happiness that they think money is going to bring to them in that sort of space. Now, there's something that you mentioned which caught my attention, and you said you were in this job for 42 years without being qualified. What did you mean by that, and what sort of qualifications were you supposed to have held to be in that position?
Yeah, so it's probably a bit of a hang up that I've got. Around my education, there was it was generally perceived that you had to go and get a university qualification or some sort of tertiary qualification to get a meaningful job. And I didn't get that. I struggled a bit at school with self-esteem and fitting into a peer support group, and I just didn't do the work that was required. I started doing engineering ultimately, but dropped out. So I would say that I'm not formally qualified. As it's gone on, I've realised how much I've learned about life, particularly over the last 10 years. But I managed to get my way into senior positions just from working hard and doing a good job. Yet most of the people around me were formally qualified. So that's what I meant there, to get into those sort of positions. I now see that being at the coalface, just being there in the real world, helping people and observing and striving to improve in these different things. There's a lot more education, not formal education, but education coming through those sort of things, having an open mind, listening to people, meeting with people, talking with people. And so I've learned an incredible amount the last 10 years, including areas where I needed a fair bit of work in myself as well. A lot of the judgmental attitudes I had, this ability to unconditionally love is so more important. Probably more important qualifications than the formal qualifications I didn't have.
Absolutely. And just out of interest, what sort of engineering or software were you sort of working with?
I was working at the time. I was working for a telecommunications company in Australia, working with a lot of engineers. So I started doing a Bachelor of Communication Engineering back in 83, 73, 74. So a long time ago, but it was hard. I was working full time, had other interests, always played a huge amount of sport, and I'm trying to study part time as well. So that was a challenge, and I just dropped out. It led me into other ways back then to, I guess, be financially successful. Started running other businesses as well as the full time role. All good learning experiences for what was going to happen later on. When we got married, my wife and I moved into a milk bar in Melbourne. I used to import squash rackets and tennis rackets. I like a lot of really interesting things out there that all gave me learning experiences.
Absolutely. You see, the one thing about life is, yes, you might be vocationally trained for that particular set of skills, but there are skills that you will take with. And I think that was the best software that you needed to learn at that particular time, not necessarily the software of that time, because if you look at the time that you were working in there, maybe it was still 2G technology, and that software or that era has long gone. And had you mastered those skills, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
So the way of communicating when I first started work in 1972 was with telex. So there was no computers anywhere. And how do you prepare? How do you get a qualification to do what we do? This conversation we're having now is a conversation around sharing our life experiences. There's no I'll do a podcast 101 conversation. It's just it will never happen.
Fantastic. So from that train, what came first, the Kintsugi or mentoring men?
Mentoring men. So I mentioned that train trip was the first in a series of events, and then a few days later, I met this. My wife and I were out for a cup of coffee at McDonald's, and she went over to talk to someone else at another table there. When I went over, I said, who was this? And this woman that I'd never met before, it turned out she was the scripture teacher who taught my daughter, who gave me the book. So there was a connection there with the book. And the scripture teacher, talked about two things. One was she was running a program to support young unmarried mums, and they couldn't keep up with the demand. They just give them love and a brunch, and they didn't have enough money to fund another day. And I said, well, I've just got this message to do something, and I don't know what it is. But as soon as she mentioned this, we committed. We sponsored that program for years to come. The second thing she mentioned was mentor training through a youth training program called RAISE. So I signed on. I did the RAISE program, and I started mentoring high school students in Sydney through the RAISE program at multiple schools. I then signed on through another mentor program called Kids Hope in primary schools. And then in 2018, I was mentoring a number of schools. In one of the schools, I started chatting to this young male student I was mentoring, and he shared with me that his father had suicided. His mum had an addiction and was in and out of rehab. He said he was living with his grandparents, which he hated. And then he just turned and he looked at me and he started crying. And he said, Ian, help me. So what can you do? What can you do in that program? So I debriefed with the counsellor and I shared what had gone on. Everything's confidential other than what you share with the counsellor. And I debriefed expecting her to give me some wisdom. And she said, Ian, are you okay? And I just started crying myself. And it took 2 or 3 months. I was flat. Normally I come across as, fairly positive, but I was flat. And then I realized I wanted to have a mentor just like I'd been the mentor to these young kids. And it's a really important point here. If I mention mentoring, most people immediately default to what I call business mentoring, which is where someone with acquired skills, knowledge, experience guides, directs, advises someone else. And that's not the mentoring. Clearly, I couldn't be doing that. The mentoring I was doing and what I was seeking, I call it life mentoring. And it's predominantly listening. It's listening, it's caring, it's non-judgmental, it's just being there. If you've got to be soft, it's actually validating someone, showing love towards someone else. So I looked around for the nearest organisation that provided life mentoring to men, and I couldn't find one. Unbelievable. In a world where men struggle more than most other demographics, there wasn't an organisation that provided this long-term one-to-one support where trust develops and you can start to share what's really going on. So it motivated me to start mentoring men, and we launched that in 2018. And after a slow start, it's just boomed. It's been an amazing journey. And without a doubt, we've saved lives through the program, we've transformed lives. I think everyone would benefit from having a mentor, someone that they can talk to, someone that they trust, and just be open and be vulnerable with. And so that was the I guess the key achievement, I guess a legacy later on. I'm still an ambassador for the program. I'm still like on an advisory committee to the program, and I love it. I was last Saturday I was at we have a regular mentor peer support circle where a bunch of trained mentors just get together and support one another. And it's all these guys, we're on each other's team. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, in this world, we're societal beings. So what that means is we learn from those that have been before us. And so many people like you are establishing here might not have those from which they can learn from. I mean, it's things like a handshake, how to look at people, how to sit down, how to be the person that you're becoming, and just monkey see, monkey do. How can I be if I have no place from having seen? And I think you're bridging that gap for a lot of people, and it just gives confidence that I'm being seen, I'm being heard, and somebody's got my back.
Yeah. When I had a contact who developed we call it a facilitation workshop for mentoring. And this guy is now doing a PhD around volunteer mentoring. But he put together this workshop, and I had a look at it before we actually ran the first one. And on the second day was this thing called a talking circle. And I thought, this is going to absolutely suck. So you have this object that is passed around the circle, and you share what you're feeling. Now, I mentioned there's been a lot of growth for me, but the fear that gave into me to actually share what I was feeling, it's all very well to start the organisation. But it was on the second day of the workshop, and this trust has developed. There's been a lot of exercises. But fortunately, I wasn't the first one to share. The very first one, this guy said, I miss my dad. And he talked about his dad passing. and they've got past the next guy. I can't get access to my kids. My mum gambled away our house. And then by the time there were tears, but it built such connection and support within that group that here's a bunch of guys in the corporate world. So I was mixing at fairly senior levels. None of this stuff happens. No one puts that out there. And because you're worried about the impact it would have. And I used to think everyone had it together, but they don't, the vast majority. In fact, one of the things I've seen, we think we're the only one experiencing something. But through storytelling, we find out that we're not. Other people have gone through similar experiences, and it's cathartic when people share their stories, but also huge benefit to other people to hear the challenges that others have gone through. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's a statement that says, I used to curse that I didn't have shoes until I met a man who didn't have feet. You know, and so half of the time when you're going through stuff, you're just like, woe is me, why is this happening to me? And, you know, is it just my luck or whatever it is? Whereas when you come across some people, like you say, you know, maybe you've got like a talking stick that is going around in a circle, that is very prevalent in a lot of other cultures. Have you ever heard of what's called Ubuntu, Ian?
Yeah, but in South Africa.
Yes.
Africa. Yeah. Fantastic. I see you. I hear you. Yeah, I love it.
Absolutely.
And in fact, our own Indigenous culture in Australia, Dijani. And my dream, and this is getting into the Kintsugi hero space, but imagine in the local community centre or the local library every week or whatever, maybe with a facilitator, a group of people get together and share stories. They they see each other, they hear, and we listen and we learn. And we help address loneliness and isolation. We help build powerful connections. We re-establish the village or the community that I grew up with. We've got a loneliness epidemic at the moment. And through mentoring and through Kintsugi Heroes, we're seeking to help address that.
Absolutely. Well, you would be surprised that in a world where everyone is, what was that again? Sorry. You know, everyone is seemingly connected, seemingly busy doing somewhere, and yet you do mention there is that epidemic. Now, there's something that I came across when I came to Australia, and that just sort of took me off my path a little bit. You know, there's the whole "should be all right, mate," or swallow a bag of cement, you know, and get on with life and things of that nature. Now, with a culture that obviously has that at the tip of their tongue, what's the penetration been like?
You mean in terms of trying to overcome that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Huge, because you're right. My brother said to me once, swallow some cement and harden up, was what he said. Because so on one hand, we're trying to encourage a culture of vulnerability and sharing, particularly amongst men. And on the other hand, you've got this, it's the Monty Python thing, you know, where he chopped off his arms and his legs, and it's just a flesh wound, and this drive to be stoic, and it's insane. As a kid growing up, I grew up in Melbourne. My dad would take my brothers and me and other mates and other boys camping in the Stress Leckies in Gippsland, and it was all about guns, and shooting things. And I hated it. One of my dad's mates, he'd have a 303, which is a powerful rifle, and he would lie on his back and he'd try and shoot wedge-tailed eagles out of the sky. There was always a justification around vermin and the impact on, but I hated it. And they would go out spotlighting. So you'd take a car out at night with powerful lights and you would light up animals and they would shoot them. And I guess I'd be 9 or 10. I didn't want to go. So I would stay back at the campsite on my own in a tent while all these other guys went out and did that. And you start to question your manliness. You know, well, I'm not a real man because I don't want to go out and shoot. Now, I'm not condemning people if they legitimately are vermin and it's done humanely. That's fine. Let them do that. But I'm no less of a man because I don't want to do the same things as them. And I didn't understand that. But now that's quite, I'm quite okay with that. I cry more now than I used to. And I'm okay with that too. And I'm often asked around the definition of a real man. And I find it too hard to define. I find it easier to define what a real man isn't. And a real man won't commit domestic violence. A real man won't treat people appallingly. But if I let my grandkids paint my toenails, that's okay. If I cry at romantic movies, that's okay. If I cry with joy for sometimes over the blessings I've got with my family, that's okay. So, yeah, much easier to specify what a real man isn't than trying to come up with a cookie cutter, pigeonhole thing, which is, for many people, it's a cross between Clint Eastwood, Indiana Jones, and James Bond. And that's just so far-fetched. But that's we're influenced by films and things, aren't we? We're influenced by advertising.
Absolutely. Well, that's Hollywood for you. And Hollywood, people should be very careful of it because, they have this concept of life that you go to school, get a job, marry your first love, buy a house in the suburbs and, get a promotion, earn a living, and then you die. And all in a space of 35 minutes plus commercials, and
Like, I share what it was like for me. So I grew up lacking confidence, lacking self-esteem. I became incredibly competitive and good at sport because I thought that would increase how I was perceived within the area. I mentioned I failed my HSC. I think I've got reasonable intelligence, but if I worked hard or did any study, I thought I wouldn't fit in with the peer support group I was part of. And I remember in my teens, I set a goal if I could just be average and have exactly what you just talked about then, Prosper. If I could have that sort of life, you left off and lived happily ever afterwards. And in my 20s, I started to read books and I found the power story, the Nelson Mandela type stories. And I realized the influence they had on me, like The Power of One, books like this, that built self-belief and built confidence. And I had this idea, if we could get, and I thought it had to be famous people talk about their overcoming adversity stories and publish it, it would be really successful in helping people like Ian. And I wrote to 3 community leaders in August 93. I still got the letter to let them know about this idea I had. One of them was Dick Smith, the well-known entrepreneur. And he sent me back a handwritten note. He said, Ian, this is a great idea. And then he added, you do it. And so it sat there from 93 to 2022. And I decided I'm going to do this thing. Now, there have been some changes. Obviously, technology change. We talked about that before. But I mentioned to a few people, and a mate came up to me and he said, I've got the name for what your project's going to be. And I said, oh, what's that? He said, Kintsugi. I said, I've never heard of it. And I explained it. And I'll grab my paperclip bowl here. Oh, there's old technology. I've still got a paper clips here. And the legend is there's a Japanese emperor who had some valuable pottery. And he got these craftsmen to repair it. And they repaired it using a precious metal like gold. And now when you look at it, it's far more valuable. It's far more beautiful than what the original piece was. And it's a metaphor for the lived experience of Prosper and of Ian, that our lived experience increases our value to community, increases our resilience. We help people reframe what they've been through to see the value in it. And we've captured over 100 stories around, the very first one was around grief, but we've covered trauma, physical disability, mental illness, domestic violence, addiction, uh, physical diseases and things like that. And they've been amazing. I've learned so much through going through these things. One of the stories was Dr. Dinesh Palpano, who's often on Australian TV. He's an advocate for people in wheelchairs. He had his back severed in a car accident and then went on, got his medical degree, works out at Gold Coast Hospital in the emergency department. Then subsequently went on and got a law degree as well. And the host asked him if you could go back to pre-getting your, taking you back pre the accident that severed your spine, would you want to do that? And he thought about it. He said no, because back then he had some mental health challenges and life wasn't in a good spot. He's now got a purpose, a passion. He's written a book and he's a huge advocate. He's making a major difference in Australia or even globally around how people with disabilities are treated and the self-respect they have. And he's helped so many other people. There's another guy who shared his story. He was an ice addict. And he said it's the best thing that ever happened to him. He now runs a rehab program where he helps people overcome addictions. So these are these incredible overcoming adversity stories, and these people passionately want to help other people. And so it seems hard to understand. It's hard for me to understand that they've been through this experience, but they're glad they did go through it. To me, it sounds really hard. And I got challenged myself. I started Kintsugi Heroes and I got diagnosed with cancer a few months afterwards. And I got challenged by the board of Kintsugi Heroes. Why aren't you sharing your story? And so I went and shared my story. And I'd love to do a series around people's journey with cancer, because again, with the attitude we have when we have serious physical ailments like that, the mental attitude can play a key part in the prognosis. If you think, oh, it's all doom and gloom and I'm gone, you have more likely to have a negative outcome than if you are positive and about it. And so this is the power of storytelling. There's a lot of science around this, around the chemical changes that happen in our body. So that's where Kintsugi Heroes is going. Can I just share briefly what we do?
Absolutely.
So
I was about to ask what Kintsugi actually does besides gold plating.
So it's evolving as I learn things. So we have a recorded conversation like this. We edit it into video, audio podcasts. We also edit it into radio broadcasts. So Vision Australia play our stories on their National Australia radio network. We put the stories into books. In fact, our second book, which is around the stories of people impacted by the floods in the Hunter Valley, was published a week and a half ago. We did another one in Victoria on the Alpine bushfires. We did a photographic exhibition around social housing. We're running resilience workshops. We're hosting things like multicultural dinners and other events based around storytelling and food. Always got to put food in there to catch people along. And we set up a community choir in our area here to help build connection. All of our resources, everything we do is provided for free. So we've got a bunch of volunteers. We get some funding to cover like the printing costs and things like that. So it keeps evolving, but it's just so many exciting opportunities. At the moment, we're doing a series around migrants and refugees, but I've met with a refugee advocate this morning, and I realised we need to separate that. The two very different things, being a migrant compared to a refugee in Australia and the hardships associated with that. We're doing another series around the incredible benefits that pets can provide to the mental health of their owners. We're doing another one similar, but around the relationship between animals and humans. So I'd love to do one around cancer journeys. We're doing one around building connections. Another one around shining the light on unpaid carers in Victoria. So if any of the listeners know anyone who's an unpaid carer in Victoria, there's these champions who give up their career or their part of their life to support someone else through for a period. We would love to capture their stories as a Kintsugi Heroes. So I get very passionate about Kintsugi Heroes. Prosper, I'll pause there. Back to you.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for obviously putting shining a light on all of this that just seems to be going unnoticed. I mean, in life, we're here to live, to learn, and to contribute. And if we need to live our best life, we obviously have to learn how to do that. And once we've figured that out, send the elevator down so that we can also help others. And I believe this is exactly what it is that you are doing in a way, and also giving people permission to be who they are, no matter what society has painted them. Because once a vase has been broken, but you no longer can throw it away because it's holding much more worth based on what has put it together, that in and of itself is remarkable. And there's so many broken vases out there that just are looking for a place to be mended, and your books, the work that you're doing, could be that golden lining. Now, what's the best way that people can maybe get part of what you're doing or join or
Sure. I would welcome people contacting me. My email address is Ian at Kintsugi Heroes. That's KINTSUGIHEROES.com.au. If they're interested in Mentoring Men, which is a free program, one-to-one, long-term one-to-one mentoring relationship, go to mentoringmen.org.au. For Kintsugi Heroes, it's kintsugiheroes.com.au. So if people would like to share their stories or support us in some way, we would welcome all sorts of contact. We post our podcasts out as in YouTube and all the audio platforms. So please have a look at the YouTube versions. And Prosper, hopefully one day you'll share your stories at Kintsugi Hero. I'm sure there's a story there that would be
absolutely.
great for other people to hear.
Well, thank you so much for that invitation. And yeah, definitely that could be arranged. I'll get my people to talk to your people, and obviously we'll get that arranged, Ian. And I'll definitely make sure that all those links to your shows and platforms are in the show notes below. Now, you mentioned something earlier on, Ian, having been married for 41 years. Congratulations to that. You're going to have to tell us a few of those secrets, to a lasting marriage. But in that 41 years, you've had 4 kids and 12 grandchildren. That's already enough to keep some person really, really busy, looking after that side of your family. But you've also even progressed with your volunteer work, and I'm not sure how it's impacted your personal life and your perspective on success and fulfillment.
Um, it's incredibly hard sometimes, and I get a bit emotional about this. I'm asked, how do you get a balance? Or I don't know. It's almost impossible. There's been some huge achievements around the charities, but one of my daughters said to me once with Mentoring Men, Dad, you care more about these men than you care about your own family. So, which is a really, really tough thing to say. And it's I don't know what the answer is. I feel called to do this, and I'm doing this, and I just love my family. I look after 2 of my grandkids one day a week, and I've looked after 7 of those grandkids at different times throughout their formative journey. And I've realised how fortunate I are to have them, but also how fortunate it is to have grandparents handy who play that role. And I say I'm a much better grandfather than I was a father. Fatherhood I found really hard. It's interesting. Women go through a whole bunch of changes to prepare for motherhood, physically and chemistry-wise, and a whole bunch of other things happen. That doesn't happen with men at all. All of a sudden, there's a baby there. And it's like we haven't gone through any stuff. And what did the guy say in his podcast? He was a self-centered jerk. I was a self-centered jerk. I said I played a huge amount of sport, and it's almost like pulling teeth. I gradually, reluctantly gave up the things that I was doing. But So what was the message? It, I don't know. I'm not an expert in any of this sort of stuff. I haven't got a pearl of wisdom around this. I said I find the grandparent side of things, it keeps me young. I love doing it. I feel there's a valuable role. One of the pictures, if I can share this, I realized, so I'm just grabbing one of the books here. It's really small and it's not going to work on the camera. But I'm there reading Bananas in Pajamas to four of my grandkids on the bed. They're all about 2 or 3 dummies in their mouth. And I realized I'm a storyteller. And I would put on the voices, like B1 has a different voice to B2 has a different voice to Morgan. Most people don't even know who Bananas in Pajamas are. But it's the power of storytelling there. So we play games. There's a lot of things I do as a grandfather around the physical contact, around the wrestling with especially with the guys, and the hide and seek and the treasure hunts and things like that, the singing, the dancing. That's what grandparenthood to me is. And even to the point where sometimes their parents come to pick them up and the kids cry because they don't want to go, which is fantastic for my ego. But yeah. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, obviously, I like that you have, realized that you obviously, like you mentioned in your own words, you are now a better granddad than you would have been as a father. And you can also imagine during that time, you're also trying to get on your feet and figure out yourself. So there wouldn't have been much left for you to offer, but you haven't just let that go by. You're now sending that elevator down, even though it's to the grandkids, and now they've got a mentor and somebody they can look up to, moving forward, because so many people would just maybe want to be, I think there's a new word for it, silver nomads or gray nomads,
Great nomads.
yeah, and want to travel the world and enjoy their retirement and not want to have a leak of their grandkids, but you are doing what other people wouldn't have been able to do. So for that alone, I think you're doing the best that you could do for whatever time you might be going through right now. So if I could ask, maybe if you would be able to go back to the time where you thought you were not being a good dad in your younger days, what would you change about that? Or what would you say to that young man today, knowing what you know now about being a great granddad?
Yeah. I probably should clarify. I think as the husband, I was worst husband. My thinking back then was that my job was to be a breadwinner, to provide the income for the family. This is going to sound terrible. It's going to upset people. I had the real job. My wife was just home looking after 4 kids. Yeah, awful attitude. I've apologised to my wife profusely. One day she'll forgive me. So I would say,
even I'm making faces at you, Ian.
I would say to that, Ian, you're a self-centered jerk. You don't know how hard it is. In fact, it was only when I started looking after grandkids, and it's hard when you're feeling all right, but when you're tired and you're sick and you've got others, it's anyway. I would say that you need to give your wife a break from this stuff. You need to be doing more stuff at home. You need to be getting home earlier and doing these things. You should have given up these other things around sport that you love doing, but you should have given those up early, temporarily, to help your wife get through this sort of stuff. So that they'd be the things that I would say to. And fortunately, I've seen with my son and my sons-in-law far more participation in that side of things. So I guess the lived experience I've had, and I guess the strong advice that's come from my wife to the girls in our family around don't put up with any of this crap is changing. But there's been a trend. My dad, for instance, back in the old days, men never went to the birth of their kids. Men would never change a nappy. The men's role traditionally was outside of the house. It was the lawns, it was gardens, it was shed. My mum never had a paid job. My mum's job was all the cooking, cleaning, everything to do with inside the house. Now, this is no justification for how I was, but it's just maybe explains the attitude that is changing around that. We've gone from a society where men worked and the vast majority of women didn't work once they got married, to a situation where, in many cases, financial reasons, both partners need to have paid work. So there's a different role, and it makes sense now. Well, it should have made sense back then, but for the men to participate a lot more in the running of the family, not just earning income for the family.
Absolutely. But it wasn't all like that, right? Ian, we did promise people the famous Cornish pasty story. And judging from your reaction to that, this is going to be a good one. What's this all about?
Okay, so we met some friends while we were on a overseas once, and they invited us to come and stay with them in Montana. And they took us around on a tour. We finished up in one of these old Wild West towns where you walk down the sidewalk under the veranda, these wooden verandas, and there's a sign, someone got shot there and someone got hung there. And anyway, we walked down to the oldest saloon in the oldest town in a Wild West town. And on the menu, they had a bunch of things, including Cornish pasties. And we decided, looking at what to order, the waitress came over and I said, well, what are your Cornish pasties like? And she told me in an American accent, oh, they're really good, So I said, I'll try the Cornish pasty. So I ate it. When she came back, she said, well, wow, what did you think about, sorry about the accent, Cornish pasty? I said, oh, just like my mum used to make. And she said, oh, that is so nice of you. I said, not really. My mum was a terrible cook. And and she cracked up. The whole table cracked up. And then I said, no, seriously, they were fine. I actually used to develop for the miners to go down and show. You like that story?
Oh, fantastic. Oh, my God. Ah, yeah. It's just like my mom used to make them, and she would have thought, wait a minute, it's it's something amazing. Absolutely. Well, I'm really excited about what we've created here, and obviously, just intrigued with the impact that you now have on all these men and all these people, that you are giving them permission to just really get back into the world and feel like they have been heard in such a way. If maybe we could conclude by looking into, you've done this, you've created this, now you've got the podcast, and you were showing us the two books that you've written for the Kintsugi heroes. What are some of the future plans that you have for Kintsugi heroes and mentoring men? Any upcoming projects or goals that you'd like to share with us now that we've been sold on to your journey here?
What I've seen through the Kintsugi Heroes projects, this incredible level of social isolation and disconnection, loneliness. And I've seen that as we've put on different events, it's had a huge impact on that. And I actually wrote a proposal and sent it last week for an idea that's going to rebuild community connection, get back to the village we talked about before. And what I'd like to, and I see it centered around storytelling and centered around food. And it becomes a magnet to get people in to start sharing stories. And the events we've hosted in Sydney were oversubscribed. We had more than the capacity of the event there. And the feedback we got afterwards was just brilliant. So I think it's we'll keep reviewing it, but it's a model for a future Australia where we have these events all over the country on a regular basis. And it just encourages people to get together, intentional, meaningful connection. And I mentioned we started a community choir, which I'm a member of. but there's people there with all different situations. They're mainly older people. That's just because that was the way it was set up. And some have got dementia and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. But the joy they get from that. I was at the choir last week. We sang that old Seeker song, Morningtown Ride. I don't know if you know it, Prosper. Train whistle blowing. Anyway, there's a guy with Parkinson's, his hands going like this. And when it came time in the song to toot the train whistle, he goes, and his hands would go down again. And his brain is still right on track. He's got, but you see the shaking. And so we sing these songs, and the facilitator, she plays all these instruments. She got out the ukulele one day and just said, look, sing along if you know this song. And she starts playing the ukulele. And the song, you may not have heard it, I Like Aeroplane Jelly. It's an ad that was done maybe back in the 1930s and continued on. There's all these old people immediately cottoned on, and the whole choir starts singing I Like Aeroplane Jelly. And it was just a beautiful moment. In fact, we've got a video of that. And then afterwards, we just catch up for a cup of tea or a biscuit. But the conversations happen, the connections happen. And for many of these people, this is the highlight of their week. If this wasn't on, many of these people would have no meaningful social interaction at all in their lives. So it's that type of event. It's getting together to hear other people share stories as part of the panel. It's hearing different, seeing different cultures. So that's the plan that's evolving. I'm going to expand it in the area I live in, but hopefully it will be expanded wider. And then mentoring men would be just one of the many resources, so many good community resources out there. But it would take that first step, that connection would then help encourage people to get involved in other activities. That's my vision.
Absolutely. I think that's, like I mentioned earlier on, we're societal we're societal beings. And yes, with the way modern technology and civilization has forced us, out of our communities, out of our clans, and they're now accepting and allowing algorithms to detect what our day is going to look like, and algorithms have got nothing in store for us. So on behalf of everybody else that you are, helping transform, thank you. You're doing the work that should be done by our actual leaders. So you, in my eyes, are a leader, Mr. Westmoreland. I appreciate your time on the call today.
Thanks, Prosper. I really appreciate the opportunity. And what you just said then, as Get Smart would say, and loving it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ian, for sharing your incredible journey with us today. And I think your life story and your experience have so much of value, so much that it's really taught me that, whatever you're going through in life, you need to pay attention. Not only, that you'll be able to get out of it, but one day you might have a good story to tell on the Online Prosperity Show. So I really, really appreciate you bringing that to the table and also showcasing, that which you're doing with the Kintsugi, and also mentoring men there. And to our viewers, if you actually enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. And if somebody's going through stuff, especially men, just pass them on this video. They might find a thing or two that might help them be, do, and have a happier existence. And while you're there, be sure to check out Kintsugi Heroes and Mentoring Men to see how you can actually get involved or benefit from these amazing resources. Now, I'd encourage you to stay tuned for more insightful content like this on the Online Prosperity Show, where we bring you stories that empower and inspire. Until next time, keep striving. Bye for now.